Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to World Consumer Rights Day. And of course, today's focus is on digital finance. I'd like to, of course, acknowledge the President of the Minister of Commerce, Trade and Tourism and Transport, the CEO of Consumer Council of Fiji, and of course the board members and all the other members of the private sector and various agencies who are here. Ladies and gentlemen, as the Minister has highlighted, of course, digital finance and the services of that is now becoming quite ubiquitous. It is nearly almost everywhere. But I think there's a lot more fundamental issues that need to be addressed than that. Of course, in order for people to have access to digital finance and the services, we need to have people to have access to internet. We need people to have access to mobile phone connectivity. And that's precisely what the government has been doing in the past number of years. Many of you are old enough to know that in Fiji, before we had only one mobile phone that had exclusivity, monopolistic position. Vodafone, TFL had a monopolistic position, so did Fintel or Cable and Wireless. Government in 2008, through the Redison Accord, actually liberalized the telecom sector. And more players were allowed. The pricing actually is now monitored by the Competition Consumer Commission of Fiji. And as a result of that, we've now seen a huge decrease in the cost of telecommunications. So, for example, before the demonopolization, unit cost of a mobile phone at peak period is about 99 cents a unit. Today it's about 23 cents a unit. You now had 7-up, 10-up, and free talk time, etc. Now, what that has meant is now today we have more SIM cards than actual people in Fiji in operation. Some people, of course, carry 2 SIM cards. There are, of course, now over 600,000 smartphones. The famous 360 rollout, the 2 rounds of 360, the 2 rounds of $50, the 1 round of $90 was all done on the digital platform. You made your applications within 3 minutes on your mobile phone and received your funds within minutes or seconds on your mobile phones. Now, there are, of course, a number of advantages of this. It means that people don't have to go and queue up. They don't have to queue up firstly to make the application. They don't actually have to queue up to receive the funds. They receive it directly into their phones. It also means that people are able to access and purchase goods a lot more readily. On the other hand, of course, there are issues of, for example, privacy, issues about access to information. Under the Fijian Constitution, you have a right to privacy. We saw in the disbursement of those funds some people using other people's personal details, using other people's TIN number, using other people's details, for example, pertaining to age and birth date, etc. So the issue of privacy is a key important element in the digital space also. You may, for example, have internet banking. You may have other forms of digital disbursements of funds, but we need to be able to protect the privacy of those people and their information. Secondly, of course, the Constitution also says that you have a right to have your correct information pertaining to you. So if somebody, for example, in the government agency or in some form of digital platform has put your wrong information, you have a right to have that changed. And that is your constitutional right to do so. The fact of the matter, though, is there are still people in Fiji who do not have access to internet. There are some parts, for example, in some of the maritime areas, some of the deep rural areas in the northern division, where access to internet actually has been very low. Notwithstanding the fact that today now 95% of the Fijian population have access to mobile connectivity. So recently government, for example, has launched what we call the Connecting the Unconnected. Expended about $1.4 million in the northern division. We were recently there where people who actually don't have access to internet whatsoever now have access to internet. We've connected schools. If there's a village or a living area around the schools, we Wi-Fi the school compound so people can actually come to the school compound and get connected to the internet. So government also recognizes the fact, whilst we can talk a lot about digital finance, we also have to ensure that there is no digital divide being created. Whilst digital age is hailed as a great equalizer, it can also be the greatest disequalizer if we do not connect everybody to the digital space. So from a government infrastructure perspective, that's critically important. Suvavou, for example, now has a cable that's landed there. TFL is soon going to have a fiber optic cable laid from Suvavou to Lambasa. So all those changes are actually taking place, which means that more and more people will get access to the digital space. And that is critically important in terms of building the fundamentals or the building blocks of digital literacy and indeed digital financial literacy. So ladies and gentlemen, I think in all of this, what we have to ensure as consumers that people do have access to the fundamental tools that will give them access to the digital space. Secondly, that the pricing is actually relatively affordable. It must be affordable. We also must ensure, so for example, government over the past number of years, it does not charge any duty on phones. So we now have over, like I said, over 600,000 smartphones in Fiji. A population base of 890,000 people, with nearly 70% of the population below the age of 40, it means quite a few young people also have phones or access to smartphones. Which means that accessibility to information, accessibility to financial tools are critically important and will be available to most people. The consumers, of course, like we have all consumers, there has to be also a particular level of protection from those who actually provide the service. If it's Vodafone, if it's Digicel. So for example, somebody may make an application on the phone, may fill out a form on the phone. If it does not reach the intended recipient, and the person has not been able to access that particular service, then whose fault is it? Can the mobile phone companies get away by saying, well, the internet did not work at that point in time, and therefore I've missed the deadline, and I do not get access to my 360 or whatever facility it is? Those are the areas that, of course, are gray areas and not many people actually talk about. And as consumers, as Consumer Council and as the Ministry of Commerce, Trade and Tourism, we need to be able to look at how we can ensure that nobody or nobody's application actually falls through the cracks. That's critically important. Even if you are, for example, making a payment through internet banking services, and you're making a payment, you're supposed to pay your EFL bill by 4 p.m., and we sent your payment at 3:30 p.m., it does not reach EFL by 4 p.m., and your electricity gets cut off. Is it EFL's fault? Is it the ISP, is it the internet service provider's fault? Whose fault is it? So these are the areas that need to be explored. As consumers, we need to be able to understand, and we need to be able to develop laws. And of course, there are certain laws that are not sufficient enough in this space. And that can only be built up through the stakeholders coming together to be able to develop those types of systems in place, and indeed the legal framework. I think even before John F. Kennedy, Mahatma Gandhi actually had said that the customer is always right. It does not mean that the customer is always right in the sense that whatever they do will always be right. But it's that particular ethos as to how you treat the consumer. That you must always be open, firstly, to the concept that your customer has a right. So even before John F. Kennedy, John F. Kennedy, of course, is from the USA, and a lot of people give prominence to that. But there are many systems and philosophies and ways of thinking that did actually exist in what we call today now the developing world, where the commerce and trade was in fact far more prevalent and a lot more early on in the historical piece. So I think the idea is that from this forum, hopefully, it's not only about the accessibility of digital tools, but also, if you can, as a group, and I'm sure the panelists will also discuss this, is what are the gaps that currently exist within the legal framework, and how can we address that? Of course, and when you address these issues, it should be for the benefit of everybody. It's not a question of singling out a particular stakeholder in the entire system, but making sure that we, as a society, as a community, as a nation, are able to find solutions that are in fact long-lasting and in fact will be able to provide everybody's rights. So congratulations once again to the Consumer Council of Fiji and the board and the CEO, and it's good to see everybody in large numbers, and we look forward to the discussions today. Naka, thank you.